I'm going to show you the practical application of personal injury, chiropractic personal injury, and it's 80% of what's going on. So if I do say something's really important, then make sure you start or whatever. Now, the 6 methods chiropractors support personal injury. First of all, what is personal injury? Personal injury, really, I mean, from a doctor's standpoint, it's treating physical injuries, right? That's number one. But it's also taking that injury and quantifying it, and then taking that number and turning it into monetary compensation. That's what personal injury is, okay? Besides treating physical traumas. So you do have to know the basics of physical traumas and the treatments and therapeutic protocols, things like that. But what's so important about personal injury is the documentation. It's the quantification and the documentation, so the patient, your patient, can be remunerated, compensated for this injury. Let's face it, who here would like to have an injury where you couldn't bend over and pick something up the rest of your life, and it was to no fault of your own? Wouldn't that be worth some compensation? Yes, it would be, okay? And that's the purpose of insurance. That's what this is about. So, the 6 methods chiropractors support personal injury claims, whether it's for the patient or for the attorney. We have any attorneys in here? Okay. And so you'll be able to comment as we walk through this. So, the 6 methods of compensation, and believe me, and I'll just tell you right now, there's 3 types of attorneys. And 80% of the attorneys don't know what I'm getting ready to show you. What you're going to learn today, 80% of the attorneys don't. It's going to surprise you. When I teach chiropractors this and they go out and try to educate the attorneys, they're surprised how much the attorneys don't know. And I keep telling the chiropractors, I said, what you're mistaking is they went to law school. They didn't go to chiropractic college or medical school. And so the chiropractors think that they know a lot more about healthcare than they don't. And it's just like you, a chiropractor, if somebody asked you about the law and specifics of the law, you wouldn't know it, okay? So that is an interesting phenomenon, what happens. And I'll tell you another interesting phenomenon that happens is, remember, attorneys are used to dealing with people's problems. And because they're used to dealing with people's problems, and I've seen this over and over, they start thinking they know everything. Because all their clients are asking them questions and for direction and guidance. And so imagine if 8 hours a day you were giving somebody guidance. Wouldn't that give you an idea that maybe you know more than you do? Well, that's what happens with these attorneys. And so you got to be aware of that, because when we go to educate them, there's a couple things that happen. They'll talk like they know more than they do, and they don't. But that's how they'll talk, because that's how they're used to talking to all their clients every week, every day, every month. And then the other one is that they don't know the medical part. And many of them don't even know the legal part. And I'm going to point that out to you. I'll show you some areas that the attorneys mostly do know and mostly don't know. I'll point that out. And if you don't know how to communicate that, you're not going to get the business, because he's just not going to know. There's not going to be any value there. So I'll point that out. But it comes down to 3 types of attorneys. There's 3 types of attorneys, and we'll go into that a little bit later. But basically, what I call them A, B, and C attorneys. And the A attorneys, they're kind of the big dogs, and they know everything. I mean, they could actually teach, to be honest with you, they could actually teach a medical course. That's how well they know the material. But that's 3% of the attorney population. And then there's another, what I call the 17%, and those are the B attorneys. And a lot of those are like trial lawyers, so they do know a lot, but there's still bits and pieces that they don't know, because they haven't been to medical school or chiropractic college, so they know the legal part. And then there's what I call the C attorneys, and the C attorneys don't know much at all. They're very different. So you got to be aware of that there's different types of attorneys, and so I'm going to talk to them differently. And who I want to talk to is very different. And who I have an opportunity to help with is very different. So C attorneys and B attorneys, I'll be able to help a lot with the type of cases that chiropractors get. A attorneys typically don't take the kind of cases that chiropractors get. So we'll go into that. But you do have to know the difference. It's very different, and we'll point this out. So remember, this is 2 parts. One is documentation, and the other part is marketing. So most of today will be documentation, and then tomorrow will be marketing, okay? So when we go into the methods, this is what we're looking at right here. These are the 6 methods chiropractors support personal injury claims. You need to know this. This is Very, very important, very valuable. You need to know this. Number one is the medical documentation. That's called all the medicals. So there's compensation for medicals, okay? You need to know that. Now, we as chiropractors, I'm going to show you exactly how to document all that, so you can fulfill and check that off. That's what I'm going to show you. Number two is impairments. That's what the impairment book was written for, the AMA Guides to Impairments. There's different types of authorities and impairments, but the AMA Guides is the Bible, so to speak. It's used by almost all jurisdictions. So written by it's through the AMA. So the impairment ratings are very important. That's compensatable if you have an impairment rating. I'm amazed when my clients come back to me, like they'll talk to attorneys and they'll come back and they'll say different things, which shows how much the attorneys don't know. And I had a doctor come back and say, oh, there's no compensation for impairment ratings. That's personal injury. That's what personal injury is. It's taking an injury and compensating for it. That's what it is. I'm like, are you kidding me? Pain and suffering. Pain and suffering. That's compensatable. Pain and suffering. Need for future care. This is a huge one. This is a huge, of the three, to be honest with you, that's the biggest one right there. If you know how to do that, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Because when these people have permanent injuries, they need some type of care. Well, who's responsible for that? You see, the person who hit them, the person who caused, that's who's responsible for it. And that's called the need for future care. So I'm going to show you how to document that. All four of these components is what you need to know if you're doing personal injury to support your patient and therefore the patient's attorney to give him the documentation he needs to win the case. Okay? That's what needs to happen. Now, along the road, you're going to have two things happen to you. You're going to have the pre-existing injury and you're going to have the low impact, low property damage. So here's what's going to happen. The insurance company is going to try to get out of their financial responsibility or minimize their financial responsibility, right? So that's the two main ways they're going to do it right there. So if you know how to handle that, you know how to defend against a pre-existing injury, and you know how to handle the low property damage case and the low impact case, that's of tremendous value. And I just got to tell you, that is of value of its own. If you didn't even know the first four right here, if you just knew how to help attorneys and defend against pre-existing and the low impact, low property damage, you have tremendous value alone for the patient and the attorney in the claim right there. Okay? Now, if you do all six of those, you hit the grand slam. So if you know how to do the medical documentation, you know how to do the impairments, you know how to do the pain and suffering, you know how to do the need for future care, and you know how to do it in subjective categories, a hybrid of subjective and objective, and totally objective. In other words, we combine all of them. It's not any singular one. And that used to be the problem with soft tissue injuries in the past, is it was hard to objectify. Not anymore. That's not the case anymore. Most attorneys don't know that. So, pre-existing injury, low impact injury. So those are the six things we're going to cover. Those are the six things we're going to cover in detail, in specifics. Now, these are the four pillars of personal injury case management. In other words, this is what you need to do as a doctor to win the case. That's it right there. Those are the four categories. We're going to go into detail every one of those. Number one is establish the cause and effect relationship. You have to be able to say that that injury was from that accident. So we want to put things together called the mechanism of injury and the history to show that this is who's responsible. Okay? Number two, you have to objectify and quantify. Remember, you have to measure. Everything has to be measured in personal injury. Because what does that measurement get turned into? Money. That's what it gets turned into. Objectify and quantify. And then there's what's called the therapeutic response. Well, what you as the doctor, what therapies are you going to do is based on their biomarkers, right? That's why you're going to do what you're going to do, or that's why you should do what you do, is the biomarkers. That gives the diagnosis, tells the therapeutic protocol, response to treatment, and if the person has any permanent injuries. That's what biomarkers do. Relative to the 3 phases of healing. How do the biomarkers fit into 3 phases of healing? That's exactly what it does. I'm going to show you that today. And then the prognosis, the impairment, and the need for future care. That's how you put the case together right there. That's how you put it together. And you use a combination of totally subjective, a hybrid of subjective and objective, and totally objective. It's connecting all the dots to tell the story. It's not a one zinger, bing, over the fence, Perry Mason moment. That is not what personal injury is. That you got this one finding. Oh, I didn't know you had that one finding. Here's the $1 million. I'm sorry. No, it doesn't work that way. It's how you put the whole case together that totally reinforces. And so the more you put the case together, it totally solidifies the cause and effect relationship and quantifies the injury. Now, that's going to be based on you. That's going to be based on your skill level. The 2 defense attorney arguments are, so in other words, the insurance company's attorneys are going to, those are the 2 main things right there. Pre-existing low impact injury. So chiropractic personal injuries has 7 unique characteristics. 7 unique characteristics. Number 1, 80% of the injuries are under 20 miles an hour, meaning they're minor impact soft tissue injuries. 87% of the injuries are soft tissue injuries. These are chiropractic problems. These are not orthopedist problems, and these are not emergency room problems. The vast majority of problems are minor impact soft tissue injuries. So there's tremendous volume, there's tremendous business there, and there's tremendous need for help. Soft tissue injuries are harder to objectify and measure. That's if you don't know what you're doing. Now, obviously, if you did a direct comparison to like a broken bone, well, broken bone's real easy, right? Take a picture of a broken bone, here's the x-ray, it's broke. Okay, here's the check. That's easy. And so most attorneys take the easy way out because they don't really know how to put a case together. Why? Because they don't have doctors educating them, showing them how this case is put together. Because they went to law school. They didn't go to medical school. Soft tissue injuries. So you must know what is unique to personal injury in that it's highly sensitive testing. Chiropractic personal injury or minor impact. Now, when I say chiropractic personal injury, what am I really talking about? I'm talking about minor impact soft tissue injuries. That's really what I'm talking about. So it's not chiropractic, but that's who sees the majority of soft tissue injuries. Let's face it, we don't see broken bones. They're going to the orthopedist, okay? That's not a chiropractic personal injury. Must know the objective testing. So there's sensitive testing, and this is very important. You got to know, you got to be real clear of what's totally subjective, a hybrid of subjective, and totally objective. You got to know that. The jury, that's very important for a jury, okay? And also how objective the testing is. Is it more of a subjective? So the sensitivity and the objectivity of the test are very important. So wouldn't it be very helpful if you knew as a chiropractor which tests are more sensitive and objective? Wouldn't that be very helpful to know? Yes. And we're going to point that out to you. I'm going to show you exactly the typical case and the common findings and what you need to look for and how you need to document them to put this whole case together. Now, when you do that, that's when you get large awards. That's when you get large awards to substantiate your claims. Now, what's the second part of the equation? You have to know how to communicate that because attorneys don't know it. So if you don't know educational sales, you're still not going to get the business Because they don't know what they don't know. And so advertising does not work, and neither does publicity. You have to use educational sales because they don't know. And we're going to cover a lot of that tomorrow. So, mainly spinal in nature, rarely see emergency type injuries. Everybody agree that that's a chiropractor? So everybody agree that's the typical chiropractic? And I tell you, when I sat in that impairment class I gave, any of you guys taken an impairment class before? Do you know what I mean? Did they do that to you? You sit in there and they talk about problems you've never seen in your practice and then never saw again in your life. You know what I mean? What a waste of crap. I mean, to be honest with you, it got me mad. That they couldn't gear this to the real world. Insurance Research Council injury statistics. 87% of the injuries are soft tissue. 32% are disc, 16% are nerve, 10% are mild concussion. What does that mean? Now, these stats will vary, what region you're in, and if you're in an inner city versus a rural county, they'll vary a little, but these are the national statistics, okay? So what does that mean? Here's what it means. Attorneys have a ton of cases with no disc injury. How many are disc? 2/3 of them are not. So when an attorney gets an accident in this problem, and there's no disc injury, no nerve injury, no broken bone, what do they have to ask for a demand? What do you have to ask for a demand? A lot or a little? You got like nothing. You got pathetic nothing is what you got. You got the chiropractor giving you the cervical sprain strain, no documentation, and then he treats the patient to oblivion with no documentation. Now you got to deal with the crappy chiropractor's bill. Because you don't have the documentation to get a claim, any decent claim, do you? A lot of fun, isn't it? And then the chiropractor thinks the attorney's the problem. Who's the problem in all this? The chiropractor, because he didn't know how to document. He didn't know how to give the documentation necessary to support the claim that supports his bill. So what's the attorney do? Refer him a ton of patients? He didn't want anything to do with them. Do you want to refer people? Do you want to refer people to somebody and then you always have to go and ask them to cut their bill? Does that just make you warm and fuzzy inside, Bruce? That sound like a great way to stimulate referrals? Why don't we try a different approach? Why don't we try an approach of giving them a tremendous amount of value? Why don't we try that?
They still cut that.
What's your first name?
Tanan.
They do with you because you don't know your documentation. They don't with me, and I've never had an attorney ask me to cut my bill. And I'm going to share with you exactly why that's happening to her. Here's the bottom line. The value that they're getting relative to what she's giving is disproportionate. That's why they're asking her to cut her bill. If she was giving more value than her bill, would they be asking her to cut her bill? No, they wouldn't. And it happens all the time. And you have to create value to support your bill. Because if you create value to support your bill, where that attorney can go and win larger awards with your documentation, is he going to come back and keep asking you to cut your bill? Is he? Why is he not? There's two reasons he's not.
He's making good settlements.
Number one, he's increased his awards. What's the other reason? Why would you? You're an attorney. So we get to pick on you today.
Tell the truth.
There's another one up here.
Okay. He's already hiding.
Behind you.
There's two reasons why they won't do it. There's two reasons. There's two reasons why my attorneys never ask me to cut my bill.
Give them patience.
Hell no. I never gave my attorneys patience.
To be happy.
Say that louder, please. Listen. Please listen. Say that louder.
I want that Chiro to be happy.
He wants them to be happy. It's common sense with human relationships. If you're benefiting from a relationship, how much do you want to destroy that relationship? It's common sense is what it is. It's common sense. The problem, hold on. The problem is the chiropractors are in a state of unconscious incompetence. They don't even know what they don't know. They don't even know what they don't know. That's where she's at right now. That's going to change in the next 48 hours. Hold your thought.
No, the thing is that I know the attorneys come to me and say, we just work with the cheap chiropractor.
Okay? You just hold your thought.
That's what they tell me.
Yeah, because you don't have value and you haven't educated them yet. That's going to change in the next 48 hours. So number one is, what's the reason the attorney's not going to ask you to cut your bill? Number one is the attorney's getting rewards from it. What's the other reason? What?
I can tell you. We want to build partnerships with our doctors and our...
True. He said the answer, but he said it nice. I'm going to say it not nice. Say it not nice.
I don't want to have partnerships with guys that are giving me bad records.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let me say it even a little more not nice. He doesn't want to lose my relationship and go back to crap. He's afraid now. Once he gets my stuff, how much does he want to go back to crap? That's what she doesn't know how to do. You're going to know it in the next 48 hours. And that's why I never had my educated. Now, my attorneys that first came to me that were not educated and asked me to cut their, yeah, that happened. But that was a great opportunity, and I went and educated them. As soon as I educated them on the values and how it all works, they never asked me to cut that bill again. Because also my bill was proportionate to the value I could create. Make sense? So the first thing you have to do is learn how to create value. That's the first thing. Then the second thing is you have to know how to communicate it. And the third thing is you can't just keep billing the hell out of people to create disproportionate value with claims. Is that not right, Mr. Attorney?
Yes, it is.
Is that not right, Mr. Attorney? Tell her that. Absolutely. Okay? And that's what it's about, what he said right here. It's about relationships. I always say this. Don't try to get rich on one patient. You know the kind of chiropractor that tries to get rich on one patient? It's the one who doesn't know how to document personal injury. That's the one who tries to get rich on one patient. He doesn't get much patients. He doesn't get much referrals. He gets that one patient and bills the hell out of them. We all know chiropractors. There's probably some in this room, right? Probably some in this room. I won't look this way. I won't look this way. And that's what it's about. It's about relationships. That's what it's about. It's about relationships. Giving value, creating relationships, and have ongoing relationships, ongoing referrals. That's what it's about. So, the top 7 reasons chiropractic personal injury is a fantastic market. It's a great market for these reasons. Number 1 is you get paid. You know, some of you guys, maybe attorneys don't know, but we have something called UCR, Major Medical. They pay like 40% of a bill. When a chiropractor submits a bill to an insurance company, they'll pay like 40 to 50% of that bill. They don't pay 80 to 100% of that bill. So typically with personal injury, you get paid when you submit your bill. You'll pretty much get paid unless you don't have the documentation to support the case. Then yeah, and you shouldn't get billed. And you shouldn't get billed. And you do it often enough, they ask for money back. And then if you keep doing it at a large enough amount, they call it fraud. That's how it works. Number 2 is it's a large market. 87% are soft tissue injuries. There's a tremendous market out there. Remember, most of these cases do not have disc injuries. They do not have nerve injuries. What's the attorney going to do? What's he got if he doesn't have a disc injury? See, the attorneys who are ignorant that don't know any better and how soft tissue works, they all just want the disc injury. Why? Because it's the easiest for them. There's an MRI, positive MRI, and they submit that. Do you know how much money they're losing on that case? It's about double the value. When those attorneys who take those cases, those disc cases, and they submit it without the soft tissue injury documentation that I'm going to show you, you're losing half the value of the case and you don't even know it. But why is it the attorney does that? Because he has a positive finding, a totally objective finding. So for him, it's real easy just to submit it, go to the next one, submit it. What's the problem? And that's a good gig, right? If I was an attorney and it took me very little effort and I had a positive MRI finding, I would do that all day, wouldn't I? Right? Makes it easy, right? What's the problem with that? There's not a lot of them out there. 2/3 of them do not have a disc injury. That's the problem. Now, if you have that disc injury, for you to have the magnitude of a disc injury, what's the likelihood you also have the soft tissue injury? Real high. I mean, it's like one can't happen without the other. So then if you have a doctor that knows how to document both, what just happened to the value of the case? You just created tremendous value for that case. What did that insurance, the case that I told you about when I went to do the education to my attorney, he had that case sitting on his desk. The insurance company was offering no money, zero, because the lady went to an emergency room, right? And what happens all the time, they go to the emergency room to take x-rays, and what happens? No broken bones, you have sprain, strain, here's muscle spasms, here's some medication, right? That's what happens like 80% of the time, right? Okay, not much of a case, right? Then a few weeks later, she's still having problems, so she goes to her GP, her GP x-rays her, no broken bones, and what's her GP say? You have muscle tension, spasm, take these pain pills, muscle relaxers, right? We all familiar with this? Is this like crazy? You know how big of a market this is? You know how many of this is happening all the time and they're not seeing you and the attorney has nothing to do? He has no documentation to support that case. What do you got in that case? Nothing. You got nothing. You got nothing. Because you're working with the wrong people. You're working with the wrong doctors who don't know how to document it. That's why. So, you got this massive amount of cases. By the way, when I went to that attorney, I said that. He had a stack. He had a stack of files like that. Soft tissue injury cases, no disc injury, no nerve injury. He's like, what do I do with these? I can't do anything with them. He can't do anything because he's got no documentation for them. Until Dr. Paul walks in the door. And Dr. Paul changed his life. Because Dr. Paul knew educational sales. Then he knew how to document that case. Then I took that case and went to court. That was offered zero. And I testified against the testimony of 2 medical doctors to a regular jury that understood normal stuff. And I was able to show the documentation, all of those factors that I just told you earlier, the medicals, the impairment, the pain and suffering, the need for future care. It went from zero to policy limits of $110,000. No disc injury, no broken bone, no nerve injury. That's what I'm going to show you. And so the attorneys that are just settling for these disc injuries are losing a ton of money when they don't work with doctors that know how to document the soft tissue injury that's associated with that disc injury. No medical competition for soft tissue documentation. There's no other providers out there that can help. GPs are worthless. How much value is a GP to a soft tissue injury case?
No value.
Worthless.
They're just throwing medication to address the symptoms, and they don't really care much more.
Any documentation to support an injury claim?
No.
It's worthless. What does that mean to you if you're a chiropractor? It's called what? It's called opportunity. But you better know 2 things. You better know what first? You better know how to document it. That's number 1. And then you better know what? Educational sales. Because they don't know it. They're in a state of unconscious incompetence. And that's why advertising doesn't work. And that's why publicity does not work. You have to use educational sales. And we'll cover that tomorrow. Next one. Repeat business. PI attorneys, once the PI attorneys sold, you think I needed to do any more selling, educational sales, when I won that case in that county? Largest civil suit settled in that county. Do you know how many of the cases I got from that attorney? Every one of them. Every one of them. Now, do attorneys have friends? No way. Attorneys don't have friends. Just kidding. Why do you think they're not sitting together? Yeah, his circle of we run with chiropractors, right? Well, they run with attorneys. They know attorneys. Yeah. So guess who else I got the business from? His circle of influence. Immediately. Just like that, I was done marketing personal injury attorney. Boom. I got all the referrals. Now, you don't have to win a big case. That obviously will put it over the top, but you have to know educational sales. Not likely to change. The laws of personal injury aren't likely to change, and it has nothing to do with the wimpy chiropractic lobbyists. Chiropractic lobbyists are wimpy. Who supports the personal injury? It's the trial lawyers. They're the strong ones. So you know how all these insurances are changing, one day to the next? It's the Trial Lawyers Association that keeps these people in line. They're the ones who fight against the insurance attorneys. Chiropractors are just pathetically weak legislatively. Pathetically weak. It's a forced market. It's a forced market. The PI attorneys need medical documentation. What kind of personal injury case do you have if you got no medical documentation?
None.
A little louder, please.
None. I need proof.
They have to. I mean, what better market is there than there having that be somebody that needs to use your services? What better market? They're forced to use it. Right? That's like communism. You're forced to do it. A captive market, you know how great that is? A captive market? That's what everybody wants, a captive market. Well, that's what this is. But what's happening to that market share? It's not going to chiropractors. A lot of it, nothing's happening. Sprain, strain, muscle relaxers, pills, nothing. Settle for pennies on the dollar, right? You probably settled a lot of cases for pennies on the dollar, right? Soft tissue injuries. Well, I mean soft tissue injuries, no disc injury, no nerve injury. Your hands are tied. By the way, it's not an attorney thing. I don't mean to make this, it's not personal, but it's also not professional. If he doesn't have the documentation, he can't do a damn thing. Is that not right? See, it's not the attorney's fault. It's not the attorney's problem. He can only submit with what he has in the records. If you don't have the ability to get it to him, he's got nothing. Okay, so this is why the chiropractic personal injury is just such a good. So this is how chiropractors support personal injury attorneys' compensatory and punitive damages claims. Now, if you're a chiropractor, I'm just going to walk through this. You just kind of be a note, but this is kind of language that's not your industrial language. So this will be a little more confusing for a chiropractor, not for an attorney, because there's more legal language in this. But I just wanted to show you, when you look at cases, all the different types of compensation, and what is chiropractic's role? How can a chiropractor who's knowledgeable document that case, okay? So, we talked about this, the 6 methods chiropractors support personal injury claims. These are the big ones. I mean, that is how I'm going to win the case right there, over and over. By the way, do you know how many cases I've lost in court testifying on behalf of my patients? Yeah, if you guys are clients of mine, try not to answer, because hopefully you're a little more educated if you're a client of mine. Okay? Do you know how many cases I've lost in court, Seth? Did you listen to them? I have never lost a case in court testifying on behalf of a patient, never. Now, you never want it to get to court, most of them won't, but every now and then you need to take it to court. And I'll show you which cases, and by the way, the attorneys that are here, you're going to love this. There's some cases you definitely want to take to court. There's some indicators you definitely want to take to court. If you have a doctor that knows that has documented it and knows how to explain it. You want to take those cases to court. You don't want to be settling for pennies on the dollar. They're very valuable cases. So these are the 6 methods chiropractors support personal injury attorney claims. So personal injury damages intended to compensate the injured plaintiff for what was lost due to the accident. So that's personal injury, what was lost. That's what we're trying to compensate. So there's compensatory damages. The award is meant to make the injured plaintiff whole again from a monetary standpoint. Punitive damages. The goal to punish the defendant for its conduct and act as a deterrent. So those are legal words. Compensatory damages, relatively easy to quantify. Property damage, medical bills, pain and suffering's harder. Some things are harder. But I'm going to show you how to make it easier. I'm going to show you the formula on how to make it easier. Types of compensatory damages. So you have medical treatment, medical care associated with the accident, reimbursement for treatment already received, estimated cost of medical care they'll need in the future because of the accident. Remember I told you, the need for future care is a big one. If you have somebody that knows how to explain it to a jury. Remember, everything we do, all the documentation is geared toward explaining it to a jury so that it never gets to the jury. Everything we do is geared. We load for bear from day one all the way through. So we get the award and we never even have to go to court and they give us what we want. That's how everything is geared. Chiropractic supports this with diagnostics, treatment, need for future care. Need for future care for soft tissue injuries. How big is that? It's not if you don't have a doctor that does not know how to explain it. So if you don't know how to explain the 3 phases of healing relative to the need for future care, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get one of the largest forms of compensation there is. Okay? Watch this. Can you explain the 3 phases of healing right now?
3 phases of healing.
Yeah.
So, repair, repair, and then.
You want to come up here and explain the 3 phases of healing?
You do it.
Okay. Watch this. I'm using you as an example right now, okay? Watch this. I want everybody else to watch this. Go ahead and explain the 3 phases of healing.
So first they're acute, and then they're going to be in subacute, so it's going to be, and then third phase is going to be healing. So acute, repair, healing.
Does that sound like she's giving value to her attorneys? You get what I mean? Everybody else in here just saw that, didn't you? I just said earlier, she just complained that all the attorneys are asking for cuts in their bill, and I said, it's because you're not giving value. I don't even know what she's doing, but I knew if she gave value, they would never do that. And hold on. And I knew that didn't sit with her well, because she hasn't been through this very much. So here we are. The care is based on the biomarkers, which is totally based on the 3 phases of care. The need for future care is totally based on your knowledge of the 3 phases of healing. And it's one of the largest compensatory components. And how well did she just explain it if she was talking to an 8th grade educated jury? Would that explanation have won that jury over for that case? Okay? She's going to get a lot better in the next 24 hours, 48 hours. She's going to get a lot better. But do you see what I mean? That was the knowledge that was getting, that was why she's asking for reductions. It was that knowledge right there. Not much. Income. Entitled to compensation. Accidents impact on your salary and wages, money you would have been able to make in the future. Those are compensatory. Chiropractic supports. How? Restrictions, time off from work, duties under duress, permanent injury, future care. If you have the documentation, you'll get this. Property loss, vehicles, clothing, other damages. How do chiropractors help that? They don't. We don't do anything for property. Chiropractors don't help that at all. It is what it is. That's its own thing. Chiropractors don't help that. Pain and suffering. Pain and discount suffered during the accident. Immediate aftermath, any ongoing pain attributed to the accident. Chiropractic supports it in several ways. Pain questionnaire, loss of enjoyment of lifetime activities, permanent injury, need for future care. So there's an array Not just one thing. There's the array from totally subjective to a hybrid of subjective and objective to totally objective that will support this. It's the story that wins cases. It's not just a Perry Mason moment. It's the story. What's the story? There's 4 categories to the story. I just showed you to them. What are the 6 categories to the story? Medicals, impairment rating, pain and suffering, need for future care, and then defend it. Pre-existing injuries, low impact injuries. That's the story. That's the story that wins the cases. Is that not right?
Sure.
Emotional distress or psychological impact. Fear, anxiety, sleep, loss, chiropractic supports, medication referral for anxiety or sleep, neuropsychological consult. So we'll go into some of these biomarkers. And our team, see, chiropractic is not just a standalone. We have a medical team to support these other factors. Loss of enjoyment, hobbies, exercise, recreation, activity. Chiropractic supports it. Permanent injury, loss of enjoyment of lifetime activities. Loss of a consortium, injuries, relationships and their spouse, inability to maintain sexual relationship between a parent and a child. You chiropractors know this. How many times have you started treating somebody? They don't tell you in the beginning, but after you get to know them a little bit, they start telling you about how this injury has now affected their relationship, that they can't have sex anymore, or they can't be as in. Happens all the time, doesn't it? Okay? That's compensatory. That's compensatory. Okay? Chiropractic helps with the neuropsychological consult helps with that also, but also the documentation we do. It's a story. It's a story. Punitive damages, how the plaintiff's actions or inactions can affect damage in the award. The defendant's conduct is deemed particularly egregious or outrageously careless. The real goal of these kinds of damages is to punish the defendant for its conduct. What's important here, probably the 2 big ones, is if the patient was intoxicated or they didn't wear their seatbelt. Those are 2 of the big ones that will put some of the blame on them. Also, if they didn't go to the emergency room. I actually did an IME, independent medical exam. I was hired as an expert witness to evaluate this IME. I didn't do the IME. And I actually had to say that part of the problem with this case and why this patient did not respond quicker is he did not get a high enough frequency of treatments in the beginning. The guy in the very beginning of SAGES, he saw him 9 visits in a month in the inflammatory phase and into the repair phase. 9 visits a month. Okay? How does that relate to the piezoelectric effect? How does that relate? 9 visits. What's the piezoelectric effect, you say? I would go back to her, but I'm going to let her recover for a little while. Because you know what the piezoelectric effect as it relates to treatment also, don't you?
No.
Thank you. It's called the chiropractic adjustment. Chiropractic adjustment is kinetic energy that's transferred to electrical energy, and that's how your body responds to stress, is through electrical impulses. That's what happens physiologically with physical medicine. It's called a piezoelectric effect. Punitive damages, how plaintiff's actions or inactions can affect damages award. Injured person's role in causing the accident, their inaction. Chiropractic supports probability of cause and effect relationship. So we do a real good consultation to make sure that we can establish with very high degree of medical certainty that this accident definitely caused these injuries. That's very important. That's where it all starts. Comparative negligence, if you're at fault for the accident that caused your injuries, chiropractic supports probability of cause and effect relationships. Contributory negligence, you're deemed partially to blame for the accident, after the accident, failure to mitigate damages, failure to get necessary medical treatment. Chiropractic supports probability of cause and effect. So there are, yeah.
Can I just comment on one thing on the plaintiff's negligence, quote unquote? not most chiropractors, but some I've noticed that would send reports that would not include the patient was seat-belted
Right.
driver or a passenger.
Right.
You know,
That's like 101.
Yeah.
That's like personal injury 101. It's called mechanism of injury. Mechanism of injury. Yeah. And he's saying he commonly gets this where the chiropractor did not even document that the person had on the seatbelt or not. You know, it's just like basic stuff. Basic stuff. Is that pretty much what you were saying? Yeah. Defend against the pre-existing injury or the low impact injury. So those are the 6 methods. Chiropractors support personal injury claims and defend against pre-existing low impact injury. Now, if you had a chiropractor, you attorneys, if you had chiropractors that knew how to do this with your soft tissue injuries, I'm not even talking about the disc injury. The disc injury makes everything easier now, or if they have a nerve injury. But what percentages of patients have a nerve injury? 16%. So it's a small number. But if you had a chiropractor who knew how to document these 4 components and how to defend against pre-existing and low impact, how valuable is that chiropractor?
The only one I'll use.
Say it louder, please.
The only one I'll use.
He said the only one I'll use. If you had a chiropractor to do that, and their bill was in line of a 3-fold ratio, are you going to ask that chiropractor to cut his bill?
No.
Tell her that. Tell her that.
Don't listen. No.
See, that's the key right there, is have the documentation to support the claim, make sure it's within industry standards. 3-fold ratio's fair, right?
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
3-fold ratio's medical's fair. Are we going to ask that chiropractor to cut his bill? No way.
I think I just made an oral contract.
Matter of fact, I would say if he's getting this kind of documentation, he would probably even let it go down to 2 or 1. There's a point you'd let the medicals even come up a little more, wouldn't you, if you had this kind of documentation to support a claim and take nothing and have a decent case out of it. Is that not fair? Is that a fair statement? Okay. Yeah.
Are you going to go into more detail about the pre-existing injury?
No, seminar's over. You guys have a good weekend. Yeah, we're going to go into detail on all of these. I'm going to go into all. That's what this seminar is. This seminar is all 6 of those. That's what it is. That's the documentation part. Then we flip it to the marketing side. That's exactly what happens. I would, if I was an attorney, you know, I say, if I was an attorney, I've told a couple attorneys this, but they just don't get it. If I was an attorney, I would have an education, and matter of fact, I even thought about putting one together for attorneys. I would have this educational program for the doctors I worked with. I'd force them to go to this seminar. So you want my referrals? You go to Dr. Paul's seminar. I don't know why you put up with the crap you put up with. You know why? Because you don't, what?
Location.
Yeah, because you don't know of a doctor in your location that can do this. Is that not right? That's why. And you guys that are chiropractors, guess how much business is available when you know how to educate your attorneys like this? It's a ton of business, ton of business. I retired at age 33. 33. It's a ton of business. I only practiced 7 years because I wasn't doing well and I had to go do something else? No. Because 7 years later I had 35 offices. There's a ton of business out there. But you better know how to document it, then you better know educational sales. Once you know those 2, Katie Bart, you better then learn how to hire and train associate doctors is what you better do. And that's what I had to do. Because I had too damn much business.